Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the SBK Betting Podcast with Ross Millar and myself, Tom Collins, and we're going to be looking ahead to Saturday's horse racing action over the next 20 to 25 minutes or so. Before we do that, however, make sure you load up our jump season preview. You can find it on the SBK YouTube channel. Load it up in a separate tab so you can watch it straight after this. There's lots of insight in there from Ross and myself about horses to follow this year. The 3-mile chase division, the 2-mile hurdling division, any division you want, we basically go through it. Plus, just watch anyway because we're at Christian Williams' yard in South Wales. It wasn't a great day in terms of weather, but it was very picturesque and you don't want to be missing out on some of those views. Ross is also on a horse, so you want to be seeing that. Okay then, on to this week's racing. SBK is offering a 20% winnings boost this week on the Grand Sefton. That race is run at Aintree. Make sure that if you fancy something in the Sefton, you bet with SBK because you will get a bigger return than if you play the same horse with any other bookmaker. T's and C's do apply, but definitely take advantage of that winnings boost. We also have Wincanton this week, Kelso, Gorham Park. Obviously, Aintree is already mentioned. And then flat racing at Doncaster, where the ground is going to be pretty testing. And Wolverhampton, which is a bit of a twilight card, starting at 2:30 and ending around 6. So lots of action this week. But we're going to start with Aintree. And we are going to start with that race with the winnings boost. The Grand Sefton run at 2:40 p.m. Grand National fences here, Ross. Before we get into this race specifically, I'm going to throw you a slight curve, although not really. What angles do you generally like when it comes to these races over these Grand National fences? Do you find that maybe previous course form is the strongest angle, or do you not really care about that now that the fences are a lot smaller than they used to be?
I still factor it in less so than previously. I feel my angle on national races has gone really in recent years. I used to feel, and I had a pretty good record in the national and the Beecher Chase, when they were proper fences, because I think you can look at horses that have got the right sort of technique for those fences. Now they can jump them, pretty economically and take the top off. I'm not against that, by the way, either. I'm happy to move with the times and it makes it more palatable and safer, and I'm all for that. But I think it's harder to find a niche angle on this. But returning course form, you've got plenty of horses. The Bowens had one that, in the Grand Sefton and the Topham had a really good record. They still got to take to it because the fences look different early on. Once they get into a rhythm, I think it's easy, but they still got to have a little bit about them to go down to the first couple of fences and jump them, but less so than I used to.
Yeah, exactly that. And there is horses in here with previous course form, the likes of Gaborio, who's around 10-1 fourth favourite. King Turgeon, who won this race last year, he's 11-2 second favourite. I'll quickly spin you through the market for this year's Grand Sefton. As I say, whenever we record this, the prices are live. The prices, are given at the time of recording, when we're recording this live, which is 10:30 a.m. Friday. They may change by the time you're watching this, but this is what the market currently says. White Rhino is your 5-1 favourite. He hasn't run for 252 days, but he represents the Greeno and Guerrero combo. Then you have King Turgeon, the winner of this last year at 11-2. Johnny Who at 13-2, running off top weight here of 12 stone. Then Gaborio, Our Power, and it's 11-1 bar. Where are you looking here, Ross?
I think the starting point had to be King Turgeon because he was a good winner last year. I think tipped up by your good self. I thought the trip was going to go into him last year because he won over 3 miles, was dropping back, didn't at all. But he's up £12, or he's £12 higher, mark of 137. I don't think that marks beyond him. I actually, in the plot jobs series I did running into the jump season, I think he's a well handicapped horse because he's had a wind up. But I think 137 over this trip, I just see him more as a 3-miler. So slightly reluctantly passed him by because I think he's got a chance. I came down on 2. Both who have got questions to answer, actually, but I think one has got compelling chances, which is White Rhino. On his Haydock win, he's well handicapped off this mark of 133. He got left in front a long way out, having absolutely travelled all over everything, and then slightly idle when left in front a long way out at Haydock. We've seen plenty of horses do that. The yard are picking up 28%. Sean Bowen on board. There's loads to like. It's just the fact he pulled up and bled at Doncaster, and he turned in a fairly tepid display until he was pulled up as well. I backed him on that occasion, and I never felt I was going to get a return. But he's a really smart horse. He ran in, they thought he was good enough to run in a graded race over Christmas last year, albeit he unseated early. I'd be stunned if he's not better than this marker on the 33 at some point. It's just whether national fence he takes to it. He's a pretty decent jumper normally. I liked him. I thought he was short enough. I wouldn't want to be going much shorter than he is now. The other one is a bigger price and perhaps a bit more of a swing. But he's a horse, again, I think is well handicapped. It's Colonel Harry. He tanked through the Coral Gold Cup last year. It was a way too aggressive ride by Gavin Sheehan. I don't quite know what he thought he was sat on, because he just kept sending and sending on a horse that was travelling quite freely. Still there, jumping 4 out, weakened down to 3 out, made a mistake 2 out, was beaten a very long way in the end. But on his novice chase form, won the Toten, beating Trelawn. Trelawn's 150 horse. He was second to Le Patron in the Henry VIII chase. He's beaten 1 length. He's a 150 horse. Even his 6th in the Turner's chase behind Grey Dawning is pretty decent form, and suggests he's betting this mark of 144. The problem is he's last seen in January falling at Cheltenham. I still thought was travelling with a degree of a chance on that occasion, but Snowdon form is absolutely flying. Around about 40% wins to runners for the last 14 days. It's a big ask to come off a fall and a long layoff to the national fences. I think it leads into what you were saying, is that they're not quite the fences they once were. If he gets into a rhythm, I think he's a really dangerous horse. He's a double-figure price at the time of recording, so I want to take those two and Colonel Harry each way.
Yeah, two-pronged attack then for Ross. Colonel Harry at 12-1 was as big as 20s, so the subject of some anti-post support this week. And White Rhino a little bit shorter in the market as a 5-1 favourite. I do just want to briefly go back to what you were saying about White Rhino. He bled last time, as you mentioned. He has come off a break. Now, with your experience with horses, do you find that once they bleed once, they'll bleed again? It's just a bit of a concern for me.
Yeah, absolutely. They do. You will get habitual bleeders. From what I could see, it's the only time he'd bled. So I would give a horse one chance. If he bleeds again, I just can never ever touch them again after that, because it is just something that's they sort of talk of it a bit like a button on a shirt. Once it gets looser, it keeps getting looser, and once it's popped, it's popped. So yeah, both of those have got a concern against them. I just didn't like the favourite, and I wanted to try and find a bit of value against, but both could bomb out. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's very fair with White Rhino anyway, because look, if he turns up, we know that he's a horse that firstly knows how to find the winner's circle, but also seems to be very impressive and progressive. So you kind of get a hit or miss with him, I think, in this spot. I'm not going to probably have a bet in the Grand Sefton this year, but I was most interested in Johnny Who. The reason why I'm not going to have a bet is that I was hoping for 8-1 plus. If he does drift out to those kind of odds, then I probably will have a play, but he's currently a lot shorter, around 13-2. The reason I like Johnny Who in this spot is that he has form figures of 1-1, 1-1 off breaks of 190 days or longer. He goes very well fresh and not very well in the remainder of the year. Yes, he carries top weight in here, but he was pretty competitive off this mark in the Irish National at the end of last season. So I like this horse fresh. As I say, I don't love the price, so I do need to see a drift to actually play Johnny Who, but that would be my angle into this race. Okay, on to the elite hurdle next, moving to Wincanton. This is going to be run at 2:55. 4 runners, dismal turnout for the elite hurdle. Rubo is your favourite at 2-9, likely to get shorter because he's just so dominant in this field. It is 6-1 bar him. On official figures, he's £20 clear, and then even if you take the weight allowance into consideration, he has a stone in hand on any other horse. You're probably thinking, why are we previewing this race? Because Rubo is going to go and win. And I think Ross and I both agree that is definitely going to happen, more likely than not to be on the bridle. But Ross, the turnout here is the talking point, right? Where are the horses?
Well, we've seen it, already this season. Now, I completely understand why people don't want to run horses on lively ground, and particularly on ground that's drying out and still has some slower patches, some quicker patches. At this time of season, trainers are dead against that. Fergal O'Brien took out 6 Mile Bridge at Newbury yesterday, left a Nodrus David horse with a walkover, but he was very clear to say it's a heavy topped horse. He wanted to run. He declared hoping there'd be a bit of rain. It didn't come. So from that perspective, I completely understand it. But even so, it was still small fields in novice chases. So my suggestion for that, and I'm sure there's a flaw in this that someone will, or many people will point out, horses going from hurdling to novice chasing, why not just say that every horse has to run in a novice chase, a level weights novice chase? They can't go straight into handicaps or novice handicaps. You're going to increase the field size. give horses a bit of experience. You know, those that want to jump round can jump round, and those that are competitive can be competitive. You reduce the racing program, which desperately needs to happen. I don't see why that isn't a smart idea. But then the other thing is, I think trainers, particularly trainers that have had summer jumps horses that are still on the go, are missing a trick here. I just looked it up and had a bit of time. So they're running for 41,000 in the elite hurdle. A week later, they're running for 56 in the Great Wood. But it's a really competitive handicap. You're going to get 20 runners. Fourth place prize money in the Great Wood is 5. It's 4. So if all 4 jump round, you can be beating 100 lengths in the elite hurdle and pick up £4,000. So kudos to James Owen, Nigel Twiston-Davies, and Harry Skelton for putting horse in this race to serve their owners. You finish 4th, you're getting two months training fees paid for. It absolutely despairs me that these trainers pass up opportunities to give horses experience. They'll take them to Worcester and say about how great it was to give them a racecourse gallop. Put them in a race and teach them something and pick up some prize money for your owners, because costs are going up. It's a desperate state of affairs. It really is.
Yeah, it's an absolute shambles. I do want to reiterate, though, that the trainers have actually put horses in, as you said, have done a good job. Frere Dams being the prime example here for Dan Skelton, he's going to be a massive prize. What is he? 25-1 at the time of talking, this horse, who's a 7-time winner. But if I just go through his last 5 runs that weren't in Hunter Chases, because he did run in Hunter Chases last year, his first 5 runs under rules, under rules. He ran Ascot in November 2024, was beaten 34 lengths into 7th. This season, starting in September 15th, he's finished last of 9, beaten 43 lengths, 5th of 6, beaten 29 lengths, 3rd of 4, beaten 99 lengths, and then 5th of 7, beaten 47 lengths. The horse is obviously struggling right now, but Dan has put him in this race and he's going to pick up, providing he jumps around, £3,885. So, look, Dan has actually used his initiative to find a spot for a horse to make some money, a horse that is regressive. He's also owned by a racing club. So that is the sign of great placing. And as you say, quite a few trainers could learn from it.
Ridden by Heidi Palin as well, I think, isn't it?
Not this time, but has been in the past.
Great experience for inexperienced jockeys, isn't it? There's a chance to get horses out and running, get jockeys on board in better races. Plenty haven't liked what he's done in the last week. We've had a few horses that perhaps have not been putting their best foot forward in novices. But he has a process, he knows what he's doing, and he's best serving his owners. And, fair play to him.
Yeah, he had, if you didn't know what Ross was talking about, at Chepstow earlier this week, he had plenty of horses in novice hurdles that just weren't basically in there to try. Harry Skelton wasn't riding the horse in an attempt to win. He was trying to teach them, which is absolutely fine. But if you're jumping off in the back quarter of a field and then you use hands and heels in the closing stages when you have a chance to pick up positions, they're not really being raced on merit. I tweeted as such, and then I got abuse for not saying cheating, but actually just pointing out to everyone. But anyway, that's another topic. Rubo should win the elite hurdle for what it's worth, but we all know that. We'll move swiftly on to the Badger Beers Chase then. This is the 3:30 at Wincanton, the race directly after the elite hurdle. Again, a small field in here, Ross, but this one's at least competitive. Art of Diplomacy is your favourite. He racked up a sequence of victories before falling last time up when he looked in control. Can he bounce back? If not, then it's probably going to be one of the veterans, because 3 under through 5 is your second favourite. Then Gustavian, they're at 130 and 5-1 respectively. Who'd you like?
Not a lot in this race, to be honest, TC. It's an absolute desperate handicap for what is a really super race. 3 under through 5 off 152 is really tempting, other than the fact I've never backed him because I question his attitude, and I almost wonder whether an easier race is going to make him doss a little bit more. And his first time up. And I just think a few of Paul Nicholls have run really badly as well in the last 7 days. Art of Diplomacy off a mark of 137, I think, is still feasibly handicapped. I've got a bit of a sore spot for this horse. I was at Chepstow when he fell at the last, and I'd battled. There was a terrible phone signal at Chepstow and no Wi-Fi. I battled to get online to lay the very short price Skelton favourite, because they'd said previously she didn't like making her own running in small fields, and that's what she was going to have to do here. And I jump in 2 out. I was telling myself how clever I was and how well I'd done to climb a wall and get some signal. And then Art of Diplomacy came down at the last, and it was quite costly. But quickened up really smartly and was going to win very easily. Not sure what the form of that race was worth, though. They sort of crawled around a little bit. But it's going to like the ground. Trainer in form, jockey in form. Just the price was a little bit short. And in these races, I tried to find a bit of value, but I couldn't. So I've come down on Art Diplomacy. The one I would just mention, if you're not fancying taking a shortish price favourite in a handicap chase over 3 miles, I think Tommy Bow on the prices I saw, round about 20, 25 to 1, he is massively overpriced. If there'd been one more runner, he'd have been in the selection each way, but we've only got 7, we only get 2 places. Last one off a mark of 140, ran poorly over 3 mile 5. It was up at Sedgefield. I'd forgive any horse running badly at Sedgefield. It's a really unique track. Previously to that, been running pretty well over hurdles, and he's a better chaser. Seamus Mullins' form is not absolutely scintillating, but he'll go on the ground. He stays really well. You know, if you were sat at home watching the race and you're just having a sort of a token bet, I think Tommy Bow is not out of this by any stretch, and certainly nowhere near by as far as the market suggests.
Yeah, he's currently 22 to 1, the outsider of the 7 in here. But Ross is going to be with Art of Diplomacy. Look, I think he's going to be tough, to be honest, to beat. But I went back in his form, and I don't really know where these wins have come from, because in the past, like I'm talking about March in 2025, so not that long ago, just a handful of months, he was being beaten off marks of 111 and 112. So for all that he has seemingly improved, he is a 9-year-old. Where is the ceiling here with this horse? I think he'll be tough if he runs to his best, purely because it's very hard to be on the side of any of the others. But I will take him on. I'm going to be with Gustavian in here for Anthony Honeyball. Ran third in this race last year, plugging on. Never really looked like he was going to win, but he stayed on relatively nicely. He comes back first time wind surgery. Last up, well, I say first time. This is his first run back from wind surgery. It's not his first wind surgery, so maybe that will elicit some improvement. But look, 3 horses in this field, Ross, are having their first run after wind up. 3 under through 5, Gustavian and Scarface. It feels like, aside from Art of Diplomacy, every single trainer in here is looking for something to try and get these veterans back.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the fact that you've gone with Gustavian, who was basically in another parish, finishing third last year. I would say the race slightly blew apart at midway, didn't it? Something foul. It was sort of making a running, and it sort of got a bit spread-eagled. I wouldn't put anyone off Gustavian by virtue of the fact Anthony Honeyball could run a yard cat and win with it at the moment. They're absolutely flying along. But yeah, I always start basically at the bottom of the market and work my way up, trying to find selection, because I don't like tipping favourites, particularly in handicap chases at short price. But Art of Diplomacy was just the most solid, and struggled to pin your colours to anything else. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I'm taking a long shot there on a veteran that hopefully can bounce back, but your selection is definitely the most solid play in the race. Okay, that's our 3 feature race previews done. I suppose 2 of them aren't really feature races, if you want to use that word, but there we go. That's what we've got this weekend. Time for our selections elsewhere then, Ross. I am at pains to call this section Nap and Next Best, unless we actually have extremely strong picks. We've been taking some flack in the comments recently about these picks. So I'm going to say, for my personal 2 selections I'm going to put up, they are just my bets elsewhere. I don't know if you want to label yours Nap and Next Best, but you can go first.
Yeah, I will call them Nap and Next Best, TC, purely because I haven't brought my tin hat with me to Prague, so I can't deal with the abuse in the comments. You know, I might crumble. The Nap comes in the 205 Aintree novice handicap chase. Mamba number 5 for Ben Pauling, Ben Jones. Goes chasing as a 4-year-old, gets an £8 allowance, which I think is invaluable. If you've got a horse that's got the physique for chasing, to go chasing as a 4-year-old, I think it's a no-brainer in many ways. Beat St Pancras in the Adonis. St Pancras has won since his rate at 128. You can put a line through his run in the Grade 1 at Aintree the Yard, but in absolute rotten form. Everything ran poorly, basically from sort of mid-March onwards. It's got experience round or toy. And the Pauling Yard, they generally have their novice chasers well schooled. I struggle to think of too many novice chasers that have jumped badly for the Pauling Yard. Probably put the kiss of death on him now. But that £8 allowance is what clinches. He's going to run off a mark of 120. He's definitely better than that. Yard at 25%. So I thought he had compelling claims in the 205. And then also at Aintree, the next best is the 315. Don't Mind If I Do for Alan King, who's rocking along at 38% strike rate. He's having a really good start to the season. He was second to Regent Stroll in the bumper. Now, I know some people say you shouldn't look at bumper form going into hurdles, and I agree with that to a degree, but it clearly shows that a horse has got an engine. You know, if they run well in a bumper, there's got to be an engine there of some sort. Beaten 5 lengths by Regent Stroll, but it was a pretty decent run at Newbury and what's generally a good bumper. was then second first time up. I think it was at Warwick behind a horse Wally Murphy was called Castle Ivers, who's really well regarded. He hasn't been seen since. The third has sort of got a mark that suggests it was a decent enough run. He bolted up next time, very short odds on, because the second favourite came out before the off, but did it very nicely indeed. And then he was third in his final start, Wincanton, on heavy ground where he got a really, really awful, rotten ride. Pulled too hard, never jumped the hurdle. Finished third. He was way better than that. But even the form of that behind Ambient View suggests that this mark of 121 is certainly fair and probably workable. He's going to like this ground. He'll like the long home straight. I think he's got plenty more to give. So he's the next best in the 315.
Nap for Ross then, Mambo number 5, 205 at Aintree. At the time of recording, only one bookmaker is priced up, 100 to 30. That price may differ by the time you're watching this. The next best is Don't Mind If I Do in the 315 at Aintree. I was actually going to put that horse up last Saturday, but then he got scratched, I think, or he wasn't declared, one or the other. And yeah, he runs again this weekend. So Ross is weighing in on Alan King's runner. I'm interested in two horses elsewhere. I'm not going to call them Nap and Next Best because I'll have the same stake as I will on these, as I will any other horse that I may play on Saturday in the UK or US. So not bigger in stake, not more confident than any other play. The first of them is Jubilee Alpha, who goes in the 145 at Wincanton. This looks like a two-runner race between her and Beth Page, who is definitely an improving type for Emma Lavelle. I just prefer Jubilee Alpha based on that Cheltenham victory last time where she just sauntered to the front and kicked clear. She looks like she has a lot of upside. She's going to be a relatively short price. And Paul Nicholls' horses, as Ross has already said, they're not running great at the moment, despite his strike rate being okay. There are quite a few horses that are bottoming out a little bit earlier than they should be in their races. So I am taking a little bit of a stab with her at a short price. The risk-free reward probably isn't worth it from a punting point of view, but I do think she is miles better in terms of natural talent. So I will be playing Jubilee Alpha in the 145 at Wincanton. And the other one is at Doncaster in the November handicap. Obviously, flat racing this time of year usually gets overlooked, but I like this race. It's the 345. The ground is going to be very testing, and I'm going to be with a horse called Master Vintner. Each way selection here. Raith Beckett trains this one, picked up from Andy Oliver in Ireland, ran once for him. 2 starts for Raith, won both times, both on testing ground. At Goodwood, a couple of runs back, this horse looked like he would just gallop and gallop and gallop, keep going. I love this trip for him. I also think he's well handicapped and he remains unexposed. So I'll play Master Vintner each way. I don't know the price currently, but I'm hoping for probably 8 to 1 or bigger about this horse. Any shorter, then I will have to probably just watch. But I'll be disappointed in November handicap if a horse who only comes in off the back of 3 races, 2 of which are victories, but at low levels, isn't sent off at 8 to 1 or bigger. So they're my 2 from elsewhere. Ross, was there any other horse that you wanted to mention on the podcast, or is that you done this week?
A horse I've always had a soft spot for, grey, called Tapley for Susie Smith. Just by virtue of a rider I flagged up on Miller's Movers last week, Isabel Ryder, attached to Jamie Snowden's yard, claims £7. She's going to need to get tidier and stronger in a finish, but she will. But what I really like about her is her positioning through the race. She's clearly got a very good clock, and she's excellent at presenting horses to hurdles. I've not seen her over fences. She goes over fences here. She's very good value for a £7. If she can translate that to fences, I think Tapley, who's running off a mark of 109, going to run off effectively 102, has got a chance. He came close to being the next best, but it was just the good to firm ground. When you look at his form, he might just find it a bit likely, but he is going up in trip 2 mile 4. I think that's a much more suitable trip for him these days. So if you were looking for something extra to keep you occupied, he wouldn't be far from my thoughts.
Yeah, Tapley runs in the 110 at Wincanton on Saturday. That's that then. All the races covered, Naps Next Best, and feature races as well. If you did enjoy this video, please like down below, whack the thumbs up button if you're watching on YouTube. Subscribe as well to SBK, then you won't miss out on any of our future content. And also share a comment with maybe a horse that you're looking forward to this weekend, or even if you just want to discuss the poor turnout in the elite hurdle, I think that will be very welcome. A reminder, the SBK has a 20% winnings boost on the Grand Sefton, the 240 at Aintree on Saturday. If you like something in that race, you'll get a bigger return for the same stake that you would play with any other bookmaker. T's and C's do apply to that offer. If you're not currently signed up to SBK, sign up now, bet your first £10 and you'll get £40 in free bets. Again, new customers only, but T's and C's also apply there. Hope you enjoyed watching this podcast. Next week, we'll be back where we'll be covering the November meeting at Cheltenham, which I'm really looking forward to. So Ross, I'll see you again then, and we'll see you too. Goodbye.